Really excited to be here. We're going to be talking about building a proactive developer security culture. A lot of people really dislike the term shift left. I'm starting to use the term proactive to sort of represent essentially the same thing. So I will mention shift left in this presentation, probably to at least annoy Chris a little bit. So that's kind of the goal there. No AI was used in the making of this presentation. I've got a little caveat down here. I found this website, Responsible AI Disclosure, and I started adding this to all of my slides because I thought it was brilliant. Even the image is custom made. So yeah, here we go. And this is the image that Alexandra was talking about. This was drawn by somebody. I was attending a webinar once, and they drew a little, cartoon picture of every attendee. It's got the hoodie, it's got the collar. I actually happen to wear green today as well. So yeah, I thought it was fantastic likeness. So I started adding it to my presentations as well. All right, so who the heck am I? So I spent 13 years as a software engineer and architect. This was a very heads down approach. I basically avoided talking to people at all costs. It was kind of one of those, do you want me to fix the problem? Do you want me to troubleshoot, or do you want to talk about it? And that was kind of the attitude that I had. I worked for a variety of companies in a variety of industries, including video games for a little bit for Sony. So yeah, then I went into leadership. So I became head of AppSec at Staples, and then was deputy CISO at Fivetran. This basically meant lots of talking, right? Lots of influencing, lots of sort of changing hearts and minds, selling security. I do like to say once you go into security, you sort of have to become a salesperson, more or less. A lot of people hate when I say that, but I still think it's true. And then currently, I co-founded a company called Catalyst, and we actually help with building security champion programs. We've got services, we've got a product, enough about that. And I co-founded and co-host a meetup group, essentially a community where we have monthly open discussions called Let's Talk Software Security. Would love to have you there. It is always a blast. It's 2 hours. That's not long enough. Yeah, hopefully you show up to that at some point. We'd love to see you. And then I authored a guide. This is a completely free guide. It's sort of a step-by-step on how to build your own security champion program. So without further ado, let's actually start with the end, begin with the end in mind, right? With the takeaway. And feel free to take a guess here. I left some blank entries for you to sort of activate your mind and fill in the blanks. Effective prevention of security vulnerabilities and incidents requires what, which you can inspire through what. So just take a quick guess at that first entry, and then I will reveal the answer. Proactive action by people. It actually takes action by people, specifically non-security people, to build preventative habits at your company. And you can inspire this through science, behavioral science. I'm a nerd, like I shared before. I love the fact that we've basically nerded out on understanding people, and we're going to go into that a lot more today. Quick note, stop using FUD. So fear, uncertainty, and doubt techniques are essentially a scare tactic that focuses on loss avoidance, which is basically not sustainable. I think we're finding this, so we'll go into that more as well. And I do want to outline how to sort of create a case or the business reason for being proactive. It comes down to cost, especially business folks. They want to see what is the cost benefit. There's a major benefit getting ahead of vulnerabilities, issues, and so forth without having to go run around and fix them in production. As a dev, I know this firsthand. Certainly spent and wasted a lot of my time running around fixing production issues that could have been prevented. So prevention is really the goal. To build a risk prevention strategy, this is sort of an outline for the way that I think about this and the way that I've built essentially AppSec programs at various companies. It starts with a foundation of connecting with people and building relationships. How do you expect to get anything done without actually building relationships? From there, you sort of spread awareness, educate. Then you really focus on finding risk. So you have to point out, hey, you know what, there is existing risk in the environment today. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to do anything, right? So that's a really good foundation in terms of finding existing risk and then making a case essentially for fixing that risk and ultimately doing root cause analysis and so forth and preventing risk. I outlined that a little bit here. Here's my sin of saying shift left, but I do still think this is an effective way to think about it. I actually think step one here is on the right side. Like I was just mentioning, it's finding production type issues, existing issues in your environment, so that you can make a case for shift left type activities or proactive activities. That is to say, why would I do training? Why would I do threat modeling and so forth, unless it's actually going to prevent issues that we've seen in the past? So I very much advocate for an approach like this. All right, let's dive into the human element here. So the 2024 Verizon data breach report reported 68% of breaches involved a human element. Specifically, that could have been prevented through better awareness, better practices and habits and so forth. But people are hard, so let's just give up on that and focus on tech and AI and all that fun stuff instead, right? No, please no. Let's not give up on people. And this is kind of where I am completely fascinated with the fact that humans are actually pretty well understood. And if we just sort of lean into our understanding of humans, we can make an effective strategy toward changing hearts and minds and so forth. So that is my approach. So essentially, we're in the change business. The other thing to think about is that the security team cannot do all of it. We do have to influence other people to take action. How does that look? So this is the theory of diffusion of innovation. It basically represents a population. Let's think about it in terms of your company. And the way that change catches on is essentially when you find early adopters, when you find those people who really latch on to the concepts that you're presenting, they are going to become advocates and more effective at reaching other people across your organization than you could be. Now, this is not the laggards on the right side. I'm talking about the people who, when you go around your company and you start building relationships and so forth, you will find people that get excited about what you're doing. Those are your early adopters. Those are the ones that you should essentially spend more time with and turn into advocates or champions. So the point is, find your allies, right? Turn them into champions. Of course, I was going to talk about security champions today. No surprise. So why are these early adopter allies so effective? And I know that this is hard to hear, but I certainly have experienced this myself. People listen more closely to peers, people that they know, their own colleagues, their own teammates, than to you as a security person. Sorry, but I think we all know this is true. I've still had people who I've set up like initial meet and greet one-on-ones with, and they're like, oh no, what did I do wrong? You know, the security team is calling me. It's like, no, I'm friendly. I'm trying to build a relationship here, right? But there's a little bit of this preconceived notion that I think we could get around by winning these advocates to advocate for security on our behalf. All right, let's talk about some of this behavioral science. So what is required to see behavior? And maybe just mentally take a quick inventory of your knowledge here. There are three things to see behavior. First one starts with M, then A, and then P. If people want to take a stab in the chat, they can. I'm going to move a little bit quickly here because I still got a lot of content to share. But the first one is motivation. They actually have to be motivated to do the thing. Okay. Any guesses for the A? Think about it for a second. They have to be able to do it. Okay, so they're motivated, but maybe they don't have the skill set or they don't have the time or whatever. They have to have the ability to take the action. Last one is a prompt, some sort of reminder, right? Some trigger for them. Oh, okay, I should be doing this thing. I'm able, I'm motivated. Now I'm reminded to actually do that behavior. So what does this look like in terms of a specific action? You know, maybe attending a live secure coding talk as an example. Some of the motivators might be curiosity. You know, you've built curiosity around the topic and so forth. Maybe they suggested the topic, right? Of course, they're going to show up if they suggested the topic. Maybe they have some sort of extrinsic motivator, like points for attending, something like that, right? And I think ability is pretty straightforward. So it's got to be at a convenient time. They have to have buy-in from their leadership or management in order to attend. And then the prompt is as simple as it's on their calendar. Maybe they get a reminder or whatever. So that's what's required to actually see behavior. I really want to focus on motivation today specifically. I found this tweet somewhat recently, or X post. I don't know what we call them anymore now that it's called X. If I heard the Mario coin sound whenever I accomplish something, maybe I'd accomplish more. Can you imagine that? You finish a load of laundry, you do the dishes, whatever. There's points accumulating. How exciting, how fun, right? I don't think anyone would argue with that, but it does bring up an interesting term, and that's gamification, which I'm a huge advocate of. But I do want to clear up sort of what the definition of this term is, because I think it's misunderstood. It's not about turning an experience into a game specifically. So if you're like, well, we don't play games at work, right? It's about using game techniques in non-game situations. So basically, what can we learn from games that help us design better, motivating experiences for the people that we're trying to reach? This is way beyond leaderboards. This is way beyond sort of some of the typical thoughts that come to mind when it comes to gamification. So let's talk about this a little bit more. And I discovered this framework some years ago called Octalysis. And the reason that I love this in terms of trying to explain gamification is it puts it in basically terms that help you understand how humans work. So the idea behind this model is that there are 8 different core drives that motivate us as humans. And you could see them listed around this octagon. A lot of them are very intuitive. There's actually a very quick explanation of them all here on this slide. I don't have time to go into them one by one. I typically like to do that in my talks. But they're things like meaning, right? Having meaning present is motivating. Maybe seeing that you're developing and accomplishing things is motivating. Creativity, right? The ability to sort of come up with creative solutions, or even just do things like paint a picture and so forth, is also motivating. We've got social influence. We're all social creatures. We've got ownership, right? The more ownership you have over something, the more motivated you are to protect it, to enhance it, and so forth. Then we've got some interesting ones like scarcity, right? Abundance is not motivating. It's the fact that things are scarce that is actually motivating for humans. Number 7, unpredictability and curiosity. This is why we watch movies. This is why we binge Netflix, right? An episode ends and someone's about to die and we're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? So that's obviously motivating for us. And then fear of loss and avoidance is core drive 8. So now what I love about this whole framework is that it's actually laid out in a way that is smart in terms of the position of each of the different core drives, where the extrinsic drives are on the left side, the intrinsic ones are on the right. So extrinsic basically means that there's some sort of external reward of some kind that's actually motivating people, as opposed to intrinsic, which it's rewarding in itself. So let's think about that picture that people are painting for core drive 3, empowerment of creativity and feedback. You're painting a picture not because you're going to get like paid or something, right? Like if you painted a picture, spent a few hours, and then someone's like, that's awesome, here's $5. You're like, well, that's not why I did it. And why is it only worth $5 and so forth? It doesn't add up, right? It doesn't really match the motivator. So those intrinsic core drives are just rewarding in themselves. It's also laid out smart top to bottom. The top core drives are actually what we call white hat motivators. They're defined as sustainable, but not necessarily creating urgency. So I'm going to take that painting a picture example again, right? You're not painting it urgently. So therefore it's sustainable. You can do it for hours and hours and it doesn't get old necessarily. And then the bottom ones are what we call black hat motivators. These create urgency, but then therefore they're not sustainable. And this is fascinating. So think about the Netflix binge that I was sharing earlier, right? Episode ends, favorite character's about to die. That little bar sneaking across to start the next episode. What do? You're like, well, geez, it's 10 p.m., but I have to see what happens next, right? That's that urgency that's created. But therefore, it's not sustainable because as I know, and my wife and I know, when you binge Netflix late into the night, you wake up the next day tired, you regret it. You say, well, we shouldn't have done that. And I've actually had to say with my wife, hey, let's just not watch Netflix anymore. We can't do it. We're out of control of ourselves. We can't even like control ourselves. So that's why something like that would be not sustainable. So I think the point here is be careful how you motivate people. You can certainly lean too far into those black hat motivators to the point that people will actually start avoiding things. This is why the fear, uncertainty, and doubt approach does not work, like I said at the beginning, because avoidance of loss, which is core drive 8 there at the bottom, is not sustainable. Okay. So we need to lean into some of these other sustainable, not urgent core drives if we want to see long-term adoption, motivation, engagement. Not everyone's motivated the same. So I've spent a lot of time with software engineers. I was a software engineer, and we basically came up with this profile that helps everyone understand software engineers a little bit more in terms of what motivates them. One surprising thing that sort of popped out of that is social influence. You don't really necessarily see or think about software engineers as being social creatures, social butterflies. But that's not the case. The reason that software engineers are actually quite motivated by social influence, it's sort of a pecking order thing. There's sort of this club, right? How do I get into this club, essentially, as a software engineer? So helping understand software engineers and how to better motivate them, I think to some of the points earlier in some of the other talks, like Akira's and so forth, building relationships with these software engineers is absolutely essential. And finding ways to engage with them based on their motivators, like I've shared here, is really going to do well for you in your strategy. So heavy core drive 2, which is accomplishment, as well as core drive 5, which I mentioned before is social influence. Is this why security champion belt levels work so well? We've actually seen quite a bit of evidence at this point that, people have sort of a leveling system that they create. And I think the advantage there in terms of software engineers, motivators, is that you're essentially pointing out things that they're accomplishing, which is core drive 2, and you're doing it in a social setting by recognizing them. Hey, you're accomplishing things. Hey, everyone, look at all the stuff that this software engineer is accomplishing. That's huge. That's huge for a software engineer, especially, my experience has been people don't necessarily understand or want to recognize the amount of work that goes into software engineering. So if we can lean into that a little bit more from a cybersecurity perspective, it's going to help motivate software engineers even more. Let's talk about rewards a little bit. So rewards, right? Just money and swag, right? That's all we think of. Oh, and pizza, of course. That's it, right? That works for rewards. No, there's more. Okay. So there's this acronym that I love, SAPS. It stands for status, access, power, and stuff. And it's really a way to think about rewards beyond just stuff, like I mentioned in the previous slide. So again, it's thinking about status, giving people status, labeling, a software engineer a guru, giving them access to something that they didn't access before that they could essentially earn. An example of that would be something like Burp or some other sort of security risky tool that they have to basically earn their way to accessing. That leads into scarcity. Not everybody has that access. It gives them a goal. It gives them something to accomplish, right? Which we already talked about. That's a strong motivator for software engineers. And then power is all about decision-making, right? So maybe giving them access to a certain decision-making body, a guild of some kind, architecture review board, right? Something like that, where they can now influence the direction of the technical organization. That's a power type of reward. So again, I encourage you all to sort of lean into some of these. A lot of these can be more effective than stuff. Think about a promotion for a minute, right? When you get promoted, is it really the money that matters so much, or is it the increase in title, status, responsibility, accountability, the recognition that comes with it? Obviously more of the latter, and that really leans more into status, access, and power over stuff. So just very quickly to put this all together from a use case perspective, we rolled out a pretty successful security champions program at Fivetran back in the day. And some of the things that we took away as success stories I want to share today, because we had some crazy stuff happening. We did have a leveling system. We had a black belt, which was sort of the highest level. And the black belts started to do crazy things, in my opinion. Because they were starting focus groups, they were starting book clubs. One of them had an idea, hey, let's just create a newsletter to send to the company. And they ran with it. And I think a big part of this is because we made the black belt status something that was recognized across the culture as a really good thing. So when people earned that status, they felt inspired, right? They felt like, okay, cool. Like I'm not just kind of doing this on the side. I'm taking this seriously enough and I'm being recognized for it. So like I say at the bottom here, can you actually imagine forcing something like this? Could you imagine the CISO pointing at somebody and saying, hey, you make a newsletter for us? That doesn't work. So this very much leans into this model of finding allies, recognizing and rewarding them according to their drives, of course. And then you'll see them emerge as essentially leaders who are going to come up with new creative ideas and so forth. So that can happen. So back to the takeaway. Who remembers the answers to the blanks? Let's see if you were paying attention. Effective prevention of security vulnerabilities and incidents requires AI and tech. No, proactive action by people. We want people to take action across our companies. And you can inspire this through pizza and other things. So behavioral science, you know. Bonus takeaway, the more fun and excitement you actually bring to your culture change initiative, the more you will inspire others to get involved. So this is sort of a call to action to be creative, get excited about your ideas, about how to reach people and so forth. Only then will you see people really latching on to your ideas and becoming advocates for those ideas. So thanks for having me. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn anytime. I'm always happy to have a conversation about any of this stuff. You can scan this QR code. It's okay. It is safe. You can trust me. I'm a security person as well. But yeah, do we have time for questions, Alexandra?
We actually do have 5 minutes for the questions. So if you have any questions for Dustin, feel free to drop it in the chat. I mean, there's always a bit of lag, so we can wait a little bit, and I'll share the link to your LinkedIn page in the meantime for those who are interested. You can connect with Dustin here. So just a reminder, yeah, every session is recorded, so you'll be able to access the recordings afterwards, and they'll also publish them on YouTube channel eventually, not straight away. So yeah, so let us know if you have any questions, but it was already great to see that some people actually have a successful security champions programs implemented, like Michael who mentioned, yeah, they have about 10% of their research and development group security champions, even departments, you know, like customer support. Oh, that's actually a personal question to you, Dustin. How did you get into starting security champion programs?
Oh yeah, this is a great question. So I remember brainstorming when I was gearing up to lead the AppSec program at Staples. And we had this list of like secure SDLC initiatives, right? Things that we wanted to roll out across the entire organization, like threat modeling and scanning and all this stuff. And we kept during this brainstorm session saying, well, how are we going to how are we going to roll this out effectively? How are we going to do this? Is this going to be Dustin running around? Is this going to be our team running around just trying to get people to do stuff? And this concept of we need advocates, we need champions kept coming up during the conversation. Well, who's going to help us with this? Well, champions would be necessary for that. Well, what about this? How do we roll out threat modeling? Who's going to help us with, get the DFDs and the architecture diagrams and all this stuff. Champions. Okay, how are we going to actually, find advocates who are going to advocate for security on our side, on our behalf, right? Champions. So that's really where it started to become very clear to me that we can't do it alone as a security team, and we need to engage and encourage other people across the org to get involved. And then we went down this path of trying to come up with effective ways to encourage them, to motivate them, and so forth. And then I went way down the path of behavioral science, obviously, gamification. How do we motivate people? The core drives, like I mentioned before. It was just all completely fascinating to me. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
And if you would have to do your first program, again, what would you change?
Oh my gosh, we made so many mistakes in the first program.
I mean, that's how you learn, but
oh, yeah. And that guide that I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I put that out there is because I wanted to help people avoid such mistakes. There was a lot less volunteer in the first programs. I do think that volunteering for a program like this is very important. Too much, too fast. I remember one of our first sessions with the champions was this hardcore threat modeling training that went over everyone's head. They're like, what the hell? What are you even talking about? Right. So starting a little bit more slowly, I think, is really important. So we actually just released an article that's the top 10 security champion blunders. This is from our work at Catalyst, and we've essentially talked to so many people at this point that we could identify the top 10 mistakes that people make. So that might be something you could share later on, Alexandra, unless you want me to find the link for that really quick, and we can share that.
I think if we can find the link, that would be great.
Okay.
So we can share it in the chat for people
I do
who
actually
are.
have it right here. So I can chat too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can just send the link in the chat.
There you go. All right.
And there is last question can take. So the hardest part is convincing dev teams to mitigate ETH, specifically updating patches. What's your advice on it?
Yeah, this goes back to what I was sharing previously around making a case, and I had to move a little bit quickly, but I was talking about finding issues in production that are important and trying to make a case for more proactive habits like mitigating issues, updating, patching, that sort of stuff. I think it comes down to showing something that's real. This is a real production issue. And then finding the root cause of that issue ultimately, and then sharing that with the developers, right? This is how we could have gotten ahead of it. First of all, this is how much time it took us to fix it in production. So this is how much time we wasted in production. Here's how much time we could have saved, right? By being more proactive, by getting ahead of this in the future. I really think that's how you make a case. Now, there's probably a lot more details I could share, but we're on limited time today. So feel free to reach out to me and I can share more details there.
Yeah, we'll put the link to your LinkedIn in the chat, so you can reach out to Dustin anytime. And I think now, well, thank you so much, Dustin, for your presentation. And yeah, now we have a small break, everyone, at least on this track, so you can move on the track 2 if you still want to attend for the presentation of Jimin Singh on the security tooling. So whether it's security tools or expensive paper rates or not, but we'll have a small break here, and you can come back in half an hour after that for the Jacob Salas's presentation on the AppSec is a structured data problem shift left sucks for SWs.
Yeah, Jivan and Jacob are both great. So definitely stick around. Thank you so much for having me. Talk to you later.